The Lithium Triangle, the $20 trillion war for the Andes. The camera drops into turquoise brine pools while riot police face a line of drums and banners. Inside a glass boardroom, a slide reads, "Securing $20 T of value," and nobody blinks. Then a pump coughs dry on the Salad Atacama. Shipments slip. Penalties stack. Phones light up from Shanghai to Detroit. Billions in EV capex suddenly on a timer. The green revolution is peaceful line. It breaks right here. Before minute 5, you'll see 3 shocks. The reserve math that isn't real, the price of water no one books, and contracts built to survive coups. To see why this explodes, we need to rewind 18 months. The fuse is lit in the Andes. Start with the math everyone quotes. Electric vehicles need lithium, carbonate or hydroxide, and demand curves look like a rocket. Automakers lock in battery lines years ahead, debt and factories welded to chemistry. On slides, the fix looks simple: tap the Lithium Triangle. Bolivia 21 million tons, Argentina 19 million, Chile 9.8 million. Big numbers, right? Here, is where it gets interesting. Those are resources, not what ships. Paper lithium isn't deliverable tons. And get this, bankable recovery lives at roughly 30 to 50% in real plants, not the 80% you see on glossy decks. Out at 14,000 feet, the real choke isn't the headline number. It's time, water, and chemistry. These Salars, Atacama in Chile, Uyuni in Bolivia, Hombre, Muerto in Argentina, are giant salt basins baked by sun and starved of rain. Lithium sits in brine under brittle crust, tangled with salts and impurities that don't care about investor decks. To get a saleable product, you move brine through evaporation ponds for months, sometimes more than a year, hoping weather and ions behave. The killer metric isn't grade, it's time to ton. And the recovery rates, pitch decks flash 80%. Plants live at 30 to 50% because pumps stall, ponds crust, reagents don't scale neat, and quality specs punish any wobble. Bankable lithium, the number a lender believes, shrinks fast when you factor that. 1% loss on paper is a rounding error. Out here, 5% off recovery can erase billions across a decade. So who's around the table? In Chile's Atacama, you've got Albemarle and SQM working under state oversight, quotas, and scrutiny so tight every cubic meter is a headline. In Argentina, the provinces control the tempo. Catamarca, Salta, Jujuy, different rules, different paces, deals cut at the provincial house more than the capital. In Bolivia, the state sits in the driver's seat, with partners invited onto a road that turns when politics turn. Layer in Chinese finance, equity holds, prepayments, infrastructure swaps. Add Western OEMs waving offtakes backed by subsidy laws and timelines that don't forgive delay. Everyone's here, everyone's exposed. The lie didn't come from villains, it came from wishful accounting draped in ESG. We wanted clean metals to be tidy, blue ponds, desert sun, a neat loop from brine to battery. But this is a high desert that runs on a knife of water. The brine aquifer and freshwater systems are cousins that share a thin house. Lower one, upset pressure in the other. Flamingo lagoons don't read procurement memos. Communities around the rim watch wells drop millimeter by millimeter and ask a simple question: who gets to drink? Here's the immediate risk nobody wanted on the earnings call. One brutal dry season can tilt the whole cycle. Evaporation sounds like a gift until the wind shifts, the salt crusts, or a rebalancing step slips late. When one Salar loses a quarter, battery plants thousands of miles away reschedule shifts. Then the spiral starts. Prices spike, EV plans get delayed, off-takers renegotiate. High prices look great on a quarterly chart, but they also kill adoption and slash future orders. The price elasticity trap is real, squeeze too hard, and demand slides out from under you. What about those reserves? Bolivia's Uyuni is huge, no argument, but its brine carries a magnesium penalty that turns every processing step into a slog. Argentina's Hombre Muerto has been quietly steady for decades, but it's a patchwork of operators expanding piece by piece, each with its own logistics and water math. Chile's Atacama is world-class grade and under the hottest microscope on Earth. Quotas are the new OPEC, except they come with hydrology models and community monitors. When Albemarle or SQM file for changes, it's not just a number, it's a negotiation with a desert. Meanwhile, tech slides promise salvation, direct lithium extraction, DLE, adsorbents, ion exchange, solvents that pull lithium fast, skip ponds, give back the brine. On pilots it looks sleek. At scale, chemistry fouls, reagents burn cash, waste streams pile up, and you still need power at altitude. Diesel fills the gap when the grid sputters, and the green story gets messy. Net recovery after re-injecting processed brine, lower than the poster said again. DLE will matter, just not on the dream timeline investors baked into deliveries. Unknown to most investors, water is the currency. Every cubic meter carries a shadow price that sits nowhere on the term sheet but rules everything. Chile writes quotas. Argentina's provinces enforce with a wink or with police, depending on the week. Bolivia guards sovereignty with national pride and long memories. Contract law tries to tame that with sliding royalties, offtake rights, and stability clauses meant to survive elections. But here's the thing, paper bends when wells run low. Automakers feel this in their bones. Battery lines don't pivot overnight. You can talk about switching chemistries, LFP here, nickel manganese there, but the jigs, the suppliers, the warranties, all of it needs stable feed, which feeds the next quiet truth. Bankable lithium is the only lithium that matters to a CFO. That number is smaller than the press release, and it's chained to weather, water, community consent, and trucks, grinding over 4,000-meter passes to a port slot in Antofagasta. So the fuse, it's lit, not by a single protest or one missed shipment, but by a stack of assumptions that can't live at altitude. Here, where things get interesting, reserves aren't what you think. The reserve Mirage, paper lithium versus deliverable tons. To understand why the numbers glow on slides and fade in the desert, we need to split three words that sound the same but aren't. Resources, reserves, and production. Resources are we think it's there. Reserves are we can extract it economically with today's tech and rules. Production is it shipped on spec on time. The headline chart lumps the first two and pretends they become the third. They don't. Not without time, water, power, reagents, and luck. Here's where it gets interesting. The banking world doesn't care how big the Salar looks from space. They care about recovery and cycle time. Pitch decks flash 80% recovery because the lab pulled lithium clean in a beaker. Plants live at 30 to 50%. Why? Because ponds crust on windy weeks. Because magnesium drags like cement in Uyuni brine. Because a DLE skid that hummed at pilot scale clogs at month 3. Because battery grade isn't a suggestion. It's a set of razor-thin specs that turn a near miss into waste. Action looks like this. A project announces 19,000 tons per year. Everyone cheers. Then the flow sheet hits the weather. Evaporation runs long by 6 weeks. A reagent shipment stalls at the pass. A precipitation step overshoots. Contaminants spike. Quality control kicks back 2 months of output. The calendar wins. Deliverable tons fall to 11,000. Meanwhile, lenders update a cell in a model and half. The project's net present value just evaporates. One engineer calls it death by time lag. It's not dramatic, it's grinding. Impact shows up across oceans. An automaker counting on hydroxide sees a slip and calls its cathode partner. They can't take dirty feed. Contracts point to penalties, but penalties don't build cars. So they push deliveries. That bumps demand into next quarter, conflicts with another ramp, and the price curve gets weird. High spot prices thrill traders, but they scare planners who sign long-term offtakes. The elasticity trap snaps shut. Expensive lithium slows adoption, which shrinks future orders, which weakens the case for expansions that would have eased prices. Now the twist nobody puts in the press release. Bankable lithium is a different number than headline lithium. Banks haircut everything. They'll apply low-end recovery assumptions, assume the slowest cycle time, and embed hydrology risk. They'll ask, what happens if Chile's quota tightens, if Argentina's province says no trucks on Sunday, if Bolivia rewrites royalties? They don't underwrite hope. They underwrite the worst week you can prove you'll survive. And that number, the one a CFO actually uses, is what drives plants, ports, and paychecks. Let's talk chemistry, because it decides winners more than policy speeches. Atacama's brine is rich, but sits in a basin where freshwater and brine systems nudge each other. Push too hard, and you upset the balance. So quotas cap extraction. You can't simply pump more to make up for bad weeks. Uyuni is massive, but the magnesium to lithium ratio taxes every step. That means more reagents, more waste, more time. Hombre Muerto has gentler chemistry and history, but it's fragmented, so expansions happen in mosaic, not a clean, single ramp. Geography writes the rulebook. Here's the crazy part. Even if DLE works as promised someday, cycle time doesn't vanish. You still need to polish to battery grade, still need to manage waste brine, still need to power the plant at altitude. Diesel creeps back in when the grid stutters, and the ESG promise takes a dent. Net recovery, after reinjection losses and real operating hiccups, lands closer to the plant's truth than the pilot's dream. Investors price the dream. Lenders price the truth. Operators live in the gap. What nobody knew at the time, those reserve slides went viral, was how fast the cost of water would crawl into every line item. Not just fees, opportunity cost. If every cubic meter can move the needle on community goodwill, you will run slower to run longer. That's rational. It also means the ramp that looked 12 months long becomes 18. The cumulative shortfall is permanent. You never get those tons back. Meanwhile, something else was happening in boardrooms. Battery teams were locking chemistries under pressure to cut cobalt and nickel. That pushed more reliance on lithium units, even as the field data said less, slower. The mismatch widened. Procurement hedged with multiple offtakes, paying premiums for reliability. That concentration created a soft cartel effect. A handful of processors with proven battery-grade capability could smooth prices with floors and caps baked into contracts. Not OPEC, but OPEC-like behavior shaped by quality control and quota mass. This was the moment everything changed for how we read those big numbers. Reserve presses stopped being victory laps and started being negotiation openers. Communities asked for meters on every well and live data. Regulators moved from annual permits to dynamic controls tied to hydrology. Finance shifted from build fast to build resilient. And the market learned a blunt lesson. The desert sets the pace. Paper lithium doesn't power a single car. Deliverable tons do. And they're earned, not assumed. Water wars at 14,000 feet. From their perspective, water isn't a resource. It's a clock. Every liter pumped resets pressure in a system nobody fully maps, and the lag between cause and effect can be months. Salar hydrology looks simple from a drone: white crust, blue ponds, but underground it's braided. Brine aquifers sit heavy and salty. Freshwater aquifers ride lighter above and along the fringes. They're connected through fractures and old lake beds you can't see, and they talk to each other in slow whispers, not shouts. Here's the thing, when you pull brine fast, you don't just lower the brine. You change how freshwater moves at the edge. That's why locals track springs and lagoons like accountants. A flamingo lagoon a few kilometers off doesn't dry in a day. It thins. In 6 months, algae shifts. In a year, nesting changes. That's the signal. You can argue models in Santiago. You can't argue a dry trough next to a corral. Indigenous communities around Atacama, Uyuni, and Hombre Muerto keep their own ledgers. Not spreadsheets, notebooks with dates, wind, cloud cover, a well's taste, micro-stories stack. A herder in Toconao marks 3 centimeters lost in a season. A farmer in Antofalla tastes metal edge in a well after a storm. A school in Sussex switches to tracked water 2 weeks earlier than last year. Small moments, right? But they add up to politics sharper than any contract clause. Cost curves pretend water is cheap until it is. Every cubic meter carries a shadow price, what it costs you in permits, in truck deliveries, in community goodwill, in the risk of a blockade if a spring runs low. You won't see that number on a balance sheet, but it's real. And because altitude and aridity amplify everything, mistakes don't forgive quickly. If you overdraw, recovery isn't measured in days, it's seasons. Chile's Atacama tells the story in paperwork. Quotas cap brine and freshwater extraction, with metering that makes operators sweat. Albemarle and SQM log flows like pilots' checklists, because exceeding a monthly cap isn't just a fine, it's a reputation hit that invites tighter rules. Regulators now look at brine cones of depression right alongside species counts. If a lagoon dips out of range, extraction slows until it stabilizes. You can hear the CFO's teeth grind when a hydrologist says, "We need to wait." Unknown to them, across the border in Argentina, the same debate plays out with a different accent. Provinces call the shots. Catamarca might greenlight a pump test, while Jujuy demands a full basin model. Some weeks feel like water futures in disguise, timelines stretched, permits conditional, informal signals sent through community assemblies. A governor announces jobs. A village asks for meters on every well and 24/7 data feeds. If those feeds show trouble, roadblocks rise in hours, trucks stop. A port slot in Antofagasta goes to waste, and an offtake customer, watching delays stack, calls to renegotiate. Bolivia adds pride to physics. The state leads, guarding sovereignty over Uyuni and smaller Salars with a firm hand. Technicians know the salt crust problem: thick, capricious, hard on roads, harder on ponds. The brine's magnesium penalty means more reagents, more rinse water, more patience. Communities expect a say, not a briefing. The memory of outside firms overpromising runs deep. So when a model claims no freshwater impact, the first response isn't applause. It's show us where the water comes from when the wind stalls for a week. Here's where it gets interesting. Companies pitch direct lithium extraction as the water fix. Adsorb it, swap it, strip it, return the brine, keep the lithium, skip the ponds. On paper, that cuts evaporation loss and shrinks surface area. On the Salar, altitude and chemistry push back. Fouling hits faster in dusty air. Reagents ship late on mountain roads. And when you re-inject, the brine isn't the same. It's colder, cleaner of lithium, but still salt-heavy. It flows differently. That can nudge pressure gradients in ways models don't predict. Net, you might use less fresh water, but you still face the same fight. Who trusts your meters? Meanwhile, community leaders have learned the language of flow rates and isotopes. In pain, a council member points to a chart. This spring lags your pumps by 2 months. In Pasto's Grands, a woman pulls out photos of a stream thinning episode by episode. She's not anti-mining. She wants a throttle tied to hydrology, not quarterly targets. A company offers school funding and a clinic. Useful, sure, but the vote swings on water monitors with public dashboards and a shutdown trigger everyone signs. Stakes rise when seasons stack weird. El Niño flips to La Niña, storms hit the wrong side of a ridge, and the recharge you counted on slides past the basin. A single bad wet season can push a Salar into a defensive crouch. Operators cut runs, protect grades, and pray a rival stumbles first. Automakers downstream don't see the raindrops, they see force majeure. And get this, they thought their 3 offtakes insulated risk. But if all 3 draw on the same basin family, the correlation is 1 when it matters. Action on the ground looks mundane and tense. A water truck idles at dawn outside a clinic while a line of pickups waits at a checkpoint. A hydrologist kneels by a piezometer, the gauge a few notches lower than last month. A plant manager stares at a dashboard, debating whether to slow a train of ponds to stay within quota. Across the ridge, a protest leader checks WhatsApp. More buses are coming, kids will miss class, the mayor wants to talk. Choices that feel small move millions. Impact is simple and hard. Water scarcity reprices every contract. Royalties that once leaned on output shift to floors tied to basin health. Offtakes bake in hydrology clauses and dynamic volumes. Insurance riders exclude community blockades linked to water disputes. Lenders ask for dual-source water plans, desal lines, recycled process loops, even distant aquifer swaps. Each layer adds cost and time, but running slower to run longer keeps the desert from saying no. This was the moment everything changed for investors who only saw brine as feedstock. In the Andes, water is the boss. Pumps don't set the pace, springs do. DLE, the promised shortcut with hidden knives. Meanwhile, the boardroom fix had a 3-letter name. DLE, direct lithium extraction, sounded like a cheat code. Skip the ponds, pull lithium ions straight from brine, put the water back, and run faster with a smaller footprint. Get ready for this, the lab rigs worked. Beakers, columns, clean feed, neat curves. Adsorbents grabbed lithium. Ion exchange beds swapped it. Solvent systems stripped and regenerated like clockwork. On slides, recovery ticked up, cycle time fell, and water use looked gentle. Investors loved it. Communities wanted it to be true. But here's the thing, the Salar isn't a lab. Brine isn't uniform. It comes loaded with magnesium, calcium, boron, sulfate, silica, each one a hitchhiker that gums up gear. At altitude, dust finds every seal. Temperature swings morning to night change viscosity. The first month, a DLE skid hums. By month 3, fouling starts. Beds need wash cycles. Wash cycles need reagents. Reagents need trucks. Trucks need open roads. And the clock that DLE was supposed to beat starts ticking again, just with different steps. Action on the pad looks like this. A containerized unit lands at 4,000 meters. Tex bolt lines, prime pumps, and the first brine runs clear. Lithium loading curves match the pilot. Everyone exhales. Then the upstream well-pulled slightly warmer mix, the magnesium to lithium ratio drifts, and the adsorbent selectivity slides. The plant compensates by tightening residence time. That trims throughput. A week later, a dust storm hits. Filters cake. Pressure differentials spike. A bypass opens to protect membranes. When they cycle back, one bed hasn't fully regenerated. Breakthrough happens. Lithium slips past into the reject stream. Impact feels small in the control room. Just a percentage point here, an hour there, but it adds up. Net recovery drops toward the same 30 to 50% band operators already live with. The promise of 80% on spec, on time, starts to look like the old beaker dream. And when you re-inject the stripped brine, you face a new puzzle. It's colder, lower in lithium, and a touch different in chemistry. It sinks or spreads in ways the model didn't quite predict. Local monitors see a lag in a spring. They don't care that you used less fresh water. They care that pressure changed. Here's where it gets interesting. Power turns into the hidden knife. DLE moves work from sunlight to electricity. Those beds don't regenerate themselves. Pumps don't pull against head for free. Polishing to battery grade, carbonate or hydroxide, still needs heat and clean power. At 14,000 feet, grids are thin. Diesel fills gaps with a smell that undercuts ESG slides. A company brings in gensets, and suddenly the green fix carries a fuel bill and a carbon line that invites questions. The water story improved, the energy story got heavier. Meanwhile, the reagent train stretches back to the coast. Ion exchange, resins, solvents, acids, bases, none of it grows on altiplano bushes. A strike at the port shaves inventory to bones. A truck flips on a hairpin. The plant switches to a shorter wash to conserve stock, pushing fouling into next week. ESG teams write careful notes about safe handling and spill plans. Communities read the material safety data sheets and ask where waste streams go. Tailings ponds you didn't plan for become part of the site map. Unknown to them, across town, procurement at a battery maker rewrites a clause. Any DLE-sourced feed must demonstrate stable quality for 6 months straight. Not pilot months, commercial months. One off-spec shipment, the contract throttles volume. That's where DLE's other knife shows up, quality. Battery grade isn't just high purity, it's consistent particle size, low trace metals, predictable behavior in cathode recipes. If the polish step hiccups, your green feed becomes industrial grade. It'll sell, but not to the line you promised. Plot twist, DLE turns into M&A bait. Mid-sized players with promising pilots get courted by majors who want the option, not the obligation. Equity swaps come with prove-it milestones. If the skid hits recovery and stability targets for a full season, the second tranche funds. If not, the option lapses. Capital flows, but cautiously. Lenders love the idea of shorter cycle times. They still underwrite to the worst week on record. The bankable number barely moves. On the Salar, operators start blending old and new. A smaller pond train pairs with DLE to smooth peaks and valleys. When brine chemistry drifts, they lean on evaporation to precondition feed. When weather turns, they throttle DLE to maintenance. It isn't elegant, it is resilient. Water meters stay public. Community dashboards show reinjection volumes and pressures. A stoplight system appears, green to run, yellow to slow, red to stop. It's not what the brochure promised, but it keeps the conversation going. Now remember the shadow price of water from earlier. DLE can lower it, sometimes a lot, by reducing evaporation loss. That wins friends, but it shifts the fight to power and waste. If the only way to keep beds clean is to truck more reagents and burn more diesel, you've just traded one bottleneck for 3. The desert notices. So do investors when OPEX creeps up. This was the moment everything changed in how DLE was pitched, not as a silver bullet, but as a tool, useful, finicky, site-specific. In some basins, it'll shine. In others, the chemistry says no. And while engineers wrestled with columns and cones, politics a day's drive away made a quiet move that would shake the whole board. Meanwhile, 2019 lit a fuse in Bolivia. Coups, contracts, and the Andes playbook. 3 days after that dust storm clipped a DLE skid, something else snapped, this time in La Paz. Streets filled, flags waved. The 2019 political upheaval in Bolivia wasn't about lithium in a headline sense, but lithium sat there like a weight on the table. Expectations were huge, patience was thin, and every promise carried a price the salt couldn't pay fast enough. Here's where it gets interesting. Contract law tried to cage the chaos. Deals came with sliding royalties, offtake rights, and stability clauses meant to outlive cabinets and cabinets after them. But paper meets power at the checkpoint, not the courthouse. In Uyuni, the German joint venture with ACI Systems, once the showpiece for batteries made with Bolivian pride, was scrapped under pressure. Protests said the terms gave too much away. The government blinked. Unknown to some outside observers, Chinese-linked agreements faced heat too. TBEA's planned salt flat projects hit pause amid the turmoil, with implementation delayed under political pressure even as frameworks lingered. The message traveled fast: sovereignty first, spreadsheets second. Action looked like this. A convoy rolled toward the Salars and stopped. Community leaders held up a list: water monitors, hiring quotas, a revenue floor for schools. Engineers waited in trucks while negotiators ducked into a municipal hall that smelled like dust and soup. Phones buzzed in Santiago, Buenos Aires, and Shanghai. A board member asked, "Are our stability clauses enough?" The local answer was simple: not if meters don't show respect. Impact rippled past Bolivia's borders. Nationalization cycles, resource pride rising, budget needs biting aren't new in the Andes. Chile had already framed lithium as strategic, with tight state oversight. Argentina's provinces sold speed but kept leverage close. Bolivia's jolt reminded everyone that contracts aren't shields, they're starting points. A clause that worked last year can feel like an insult this year if wells dip or headlines flare. Lenders noticed. Political risk insurance added riders for social unrest tied to water. Premiums climbed, timelines stretched. Meanwhile, China played the long game. Equity plus infrastructure. A road here, a transmission line there, a prepayment that unlocks a port slot when the first drums ship. Patience buys options. If a project pauses, capital doesn't scream, it waits, or it slides to a neighbor basin. Offtake letters come with quiet perks: training programs, lab upgrades, even university ties that shape the next generation of metallurgists. The aim isn't this cargo, it's the corridor. Western buyers pivoted differently. The Inflation Reduction Act in the United States threw money at secure supply, but secure didn't just mean ally flags. It meant traceability, labor standards, and low-carbon power claims that are hard to prove at altitude. Automakers started asking for provenance audits and carbon intensity caps alongside price. Some deals offered price floors and ceilings to calm chaos, quasi-cartel logic wrapped in ESG language. We'll pay steady if you ship steady. The catch: steady needs water and trust. But here's the thing: geography keeps veto power. A coup-proof contract can't move a mountain pass after a slide. The stability clause doesn't pump a dry well. So the Andes playbook evolved. Operators baked hydrology triggers into offtakes. If basin indicators flash yellow, volumes throttle without penalties. Communities got revenue floors tied to aquifer health, not just tonnage. Money still flows when pumps slow. That swap buys time. It also sets a precedent others will copy. Plot twist: some governments learn to weaponize certainty. Publish live water data. Set transparent quotas with public models. Make approvals slow but predictable. Investors hate surprises more than they hate limits. Chile's tight leash suddenly looked like a premium product compared to volatile speed elsewhere. Argentina's provinces responded with fast lanes that still required baseline basin studies and real-time monitors everyone could see. Bolivia's stance hardened around state leadership paired with selective partnerships. Control the hub, invite help on spokes. Unknown to them, across town in a bank tower, a project finance team rewrote risk. They split loans into tranches tied to social milestones, signed water councils, functioning dashboards, independent audits. Hit it, pricing steps down. Money, calibrated to politics, started behaving like another engineer on the project, nudging choices toward resilience. Micro moments kept shaping macro outcomes. A minister's breakfast gets interrupted by news that a blockade lifted after the company agreed to publish reinjection pressures hourly. An offtake manager drops a coffee when a text lands. Shipment diverted, port strike. A young geologist from Potosi walks her grandmother through a live map of the basin. The old woman nods and says, "If the spring is fine, let them work." This was the moment everything changed in boardrooms. Coup-proof stopped meaning iron contract and started meaning elastic system. Build slack into logistics. Pair diesel with a solar battery microgrid to cover brownouts. Keep a reagent buffer for a month, not a week. Train 2 local crews for every critical role so attrition doesn't stall a line. Pay for buses on election day so turnout is high and rumors are low. It's unglamorous. It works. Geography still picks winners. Atacama's world-class chemistry plus strict quotas creates premium, predictable tons if you play by the hydrology. Uyuni's scale demands patience and chemistry discipline, or it punishes you with magnesium and politics. Hombre Muerto's mosaic favors operators who collaborate across fences. Policy can tilt the field. It can't flatten the Andes. Meanwhile, 2019's lesson kept echoing. Sovereignty isn't a hurdle, it's the ground. If you treat it like friction, it burns you. If you treat it like design, it carries you. And while the lawyers redlined verbs, a convoy of trucks crawled toward a port slot that would decide whether a battery plant ran a Sunday shift or went dark. 3 Salars, 3 fates. While that convoy crawled, 3 landscapes set 3 different destinies. Same sun, same altitude, totally different fates. Start in the Atacama. World-class brine, tight quotas, everything metered like a heartbeat. Pumps don't just run, they report. Albemarle and SQM live by dashboards that show flows, cones of depression, lagoon levels. Battery grade isn't the only spec. Hydrology hits a spec too. Miss it, you slow down. Here's the crazy part. Predictability becomes a product. An offtake buyer will pay more for tons that won't vanish in a dry month. So the chessboard shifts to quota management. Shift a pond train a week sooner. Hold back when winds push crusts across a shallow pan. Blend feed from a deeper well to keep a cone stable. The operations feel like air traffic control. Action on a Tuesday looks small and exact. A supervisor in pain checks a freshwater meter, slightly high. He radios a cutback. A hydrologist tags a lagoon reading outside the comfort band, yellow. Extraction throttles by 3% for 10 days. The port scheduler in Antofagasta keeps the slot because the operator banked a buffer last quarter. A drum line for hydroxide clears quality with room to spare. Buyers breathe. Nobody cheers. That's the point. Atacama rewards boring excellence and punishes bravado fast. Impact travels straight to balance sheets. Stable, premium tons anchor supply chains. Financing comes cheaper. Insurers bite because live water data lowers guesswork. Communities don't wave pom-poms, but they renew agreements if the screens they can read keep showing green and yellow more than red. The desert still decides, but you're playing with house rules you can see. Now jump to Uyuni in Bolivia. Size that makes headlines, a salt crust that makes work hard. Magnesium rides shotgun in the brine, grabbing at every process step. Trucks bounce over crust that sometimes pretends to be a road, sometimes eats axles. The state leads with pride and caution. Partners show up with pilots and patience because the chemistry taxes you if you rush. Get ready for this. The first time a precipitation run overshoots because the mg ratio drifted, you don't lose a day. You can lose a month of cleaning up a cascade of off-spec. Day in Uyuni is a lesson in pacing. An engineer eyes a titration curve and slows feed before a reagent spikes. A community liaison sits under a tin roof, walks through reinjection diagrams until a roomful of neighbors nods. A state manager insists on a training run for new operators even though a contract clock is ticking. Trucks carry more reagents than you budgeted because safety stock at 14,000 feet isn't a luxury. The sun is free, everything else you earn. Impact feels like drag until it feels like safety. The ramp is gentler, but off-spec claims fall. Politics still sits in the cab. 2019 proved that but each stable month buys trust. A transparency board posts reinjection pressures. A regional lab opens to test brine independently. The message, scale will come, but only if chemistry and community get along. In Uyuni, patience is not PR, it's a process variable. Now to Hombre Muerto in Argentina. Not the biggest, not the richest, but steady like an old truck that always starts. Legacy operations taught tricks that don't show in investor decks. How to read a sky and know a pond train needs a day more. How to load a switchback so a tire won't pop on the last bend. The basin is a mosaic. Different operators, different footprints, a shared aquifer edge. Collaboration isn't a slogan here, it's Tuesday logistics. Action starts before dawn. A salt worker checks a windbreak line, adjusts tarps to keep dust out of a crystallizer. A farmer counts cracked wells, then meets a company rep who shows the new loop that recycles rinsed water into preconditioning brine. A trucker eases up the pass, double clutching, eye on a weather app pinging a snow band. At a small plant, a tech babysits a DLE skid through a maintenance wash, then slides product to a polishing line that's been humming for a decade. Impact shows up in rhythm. Hombre Muerto doesn't wow on throughput, it wins on fewer surprises. That matters to a cathode plant that can't afford a batch that won't settle right. The province's stance, pragmatic hands-on means permits talk to road crews and clinics. When a blockade threatens, someone calls someone's cousin, a council meets, conditions get posted, meters online, school buses funded, a water truck for the health post. It's not neat, it is functional. Human moments keep the three Salars real. In Atacama, a mechanic teaches his kid to listen for a pump's bad bearing by sound. In Culture K, a woman folds a stipend from a community revenue floor into a jar marked rainy season, even though it rarely rains. On the switchbacks above Antofalla, a driver taps a charm on the dash before the steep grade. At Megalones, a port clerk juggles ships, and a storm warning squeezes a late barge into a gap and texts a friend, bonus might land. Logistics tie it all together and choke it too. 4,000-meter roads eat brake pads and time. A slide can erase a week. Antofagasta is a bottleneck with a pecking order, copper first, then everything else. Lithium gets windows you defend with perfect paperwork and favors banked in quiet years. Miss one, and your stable month unravels in a queue. Here's the takeaway none of the slides capture. Portfolio risk is real. Knock out one Salar, quota cuts in Atacama, politics in Uyuni, a road washout in Hombre Muerto, and the world feels it. Not in headlines the next day, but in battery plants running Saturdays to catch up, in offtakes pulled forward, in a quiet email that says a promised trim model won't launch in spring. Geography isn't background, it's the plot. And the next act, get ready for this, the cartel you didn't see coming. The quiet cartel, quotas, offtakes, and shadow control. Get ready for this. The cartel you didn't see coming doesn't meet in a hotel. It lives in spreadsheets and hydrology dashboards. It's state quotas stitched to corporate offtakes, and it works because battery-grade quality is rare and time-to-ton rules everything. Nobody calls it a cartel, but the effect, priced paths that look suspiciously smooth for something this messy. Start with quotas. Chile posts hard caps that flex with basin health, and operators plan 6 months ahead so they don't hit a red light mid-quarter. That cap doesn't just limit volume, it defines who matters. Tons that can ship reliably at spec earn a premium. In Argentina, provincial permits act like soft valves, tighten here, loosen there, signaled through studies, public meetings, and yes, politics. Bolivia's state-led model picks partners and tempo, which sets an implicit ceiling no investor can bulldoze. The sum is control without a cartel badge. Now bolt on offtakes. Automakers sign long contracts with floors and ceilings. Floors keep projects alive in slumps. Ceilings keep panic from blowing up budgets when spot spikes. This band gives planners a safe lane, and it pushes volatility out to traders and marginal supply. If you can't hit battery grade every week, you get pushed to the edge of the lane. That's where discounts live. That's also where dreams go to die. Here's the crazy part, hidden concentration. A few processors in the triangle can make consistent battery-grade carbonate and hydroxide. Not good once, but good every month across seasons. Cathode makers know their names. They build recipes around their quirks. If one of those plants coughs, a whole chemistry family gets the flu. So those processors become quiet choke points. They don't set price with a phone call. They set it by deciding who gets the good stuff and when. Meanwhile, cathode factories tilt the field with their own bottlenecks. LFP took off because it dumped nickel and cobalt headaches, but it still guzzles lithium units. NMC moved to leaner nickel and less cobalt, but its tolerance for impurity is brutal. If you feed a line used to one source with a slightly different particle size or trace metal profile, yields slip. Throughput dips a hair. That hair is millions. So cathode buyers cluster around proven sources, and they reward steadiness with premiums baked into technical service fees and quality bonuses. Not price fixing, just the gravity of trust. Price bands show up in the fine print. A contract might say carbonate will clear between X and Y, indexed to a benchmark with quarterly reviews. When spot runs hot, the ceiling shields buyers. When spot falls out of bed, the floor saves the miner. The band narrows over time if the operator hits hydrology and quality targets. Miss them, the band widens, or a flex volume clause kicks in, and buyers can defer. Multiply that across 10 core contracts, and you've got a corridor that herds price like guardrails on a mountain road. Plot twist, sodium ion enters the chat. It won't kill lithium, but it threatens low-end use cases, short-range cars, scooters, grid storage that cares more about cost than weight. That shadow forces lithium owners to think like scarcity managers. Squeeze value now, while demand is inelastic for premium chemistries. Defend quality, protect quotas. Stretch offtake tenors just enough to keep banks happy, but not so long you're locked if sodium eats the edges. The message to the market is subtle. Lithium is abundant, in theory. Deliverable, battery-grade tons are not. While that was happening in Shanghai labs, risk teams in Santiago were busy. They modeled Cartel without Cartel outcomes, a handful of reliable operators, state-enforced quotas, and contract bans smoothing out chaos. The output looked like a soft floor, a soft ceiling, and long periods where price wandered in between, tethered by hydrology updates more than headlines. Traders grumbled, CFOs slept. Unknown to them, across town, a midstream giant leaned in. Open processing hub sounded democratic. In practice, whoever owned the polishing step could tilt the table. They could prioritize feed from partners with aligned offtakes, shaping who met spec and who got bumped. They could whisper to cathode customers, "We can guarantee consistency if you stick with our ecosystem." It was OPEC. It was Apple-style ecosystem gravity, built from purity curves and tolerance windows. Communities felt the shape of this, even if they didn't use the words. Revenue floors pegged to aquifer health meant an operator had reason to slow when the desert asked. That created stable tons, which fed stable contracts, which funded the floors. A loop. Break it with a greedy quarter, and the loop flips. Protests, deferrals, premium lost. The cartel effect depended on trust as much as on quotas. Impact arrived quiet and firm. Investors with short-term heat found the door. Long-term money with patience stepped in, happy to swap wild upside for a smoother ride. Automakers consolidated vendors, trading optionality for fewer midnight calls. Provinces realized that clear public water rules were an asset, predictability priced like ore. And the price chart, jerky for years, started gliding inside a channel. But wait, there's more. That glide only holds if nature and ports play along, and both have a habit of tearing up scripts. While the quiet cartel tuned its corridor, Wall Street started wiring the desert in another way, through pipes, ports, and papers that set invisible tolls the market couldn't ignore. Financialized geography, ports, power, and derivatives. While the quiet cartel tuned its corridor, the desert got wired with money in ways you can't film, but you can feel. Power lines, diesel depots, and port slots started acting like invisible toll booths. Own the chokepoint, and you nudge the price without touching the mineral. Start with power. At 14,000 feet, a steady megawatt is gold. A private line from a valley substation to a Salars doesn't just keep pumps on, it sets the project's risk class. Banks shave interest when blackout odds drop. A miner signs a take-or-pay with a utility, adds a solar field plus a battery to cover brownouts, and suddenly their tons look safer than a rival's running on rented gensets. That safety price is in. Buyers pay a premium to avoid the 2 a.m. we're down text. Here's where it gets interesting. Diesel depots at altitude become price setters too. Whoever stocks clean fuel at a ridge pass can keep reagent trucks moving when thin air and cold mornings stall engines. A week of diesel cushion can turn a snow event into a shrug instead of a shutdown. That shrug is cash. A project that never misses a port window becomes the benchmark others have to beat in negotiations. Ports are the loudest tolls. Antofagasta and Medullones don't care about your slide deck. They care about berths, cranes, labor, and a storm band rolling in on Thursday. A reserved slot is throughput, and throughput is valuation. Miss your slot, you cascade into the back of a queue behind copper giants. So companies prepay for windows a quarter ahead. They book storage sheds close to the quay, rent forklifts, even retain a tug. Those aren't expenses, they're insurance against chaos. And get this, you're not just buying time, you're buying price certainty. A ship that sails on Tuesday beats a ship that might sail next week by thousands per ton in headache avoided. Unknown to them, across town in a glass tower, freight traders plugged this into models. They stitched freight futures to lithium contracts. If you can hedge the cost of a container and the odds of a delay, you're halfway to calm cash flow. New paper hit desks, carbonate with a port uplift, hydroxide with a power risk discount, optionality to defer a shipment without penalty if a hydrology trigger blinks. The contracts finally started speaking the Andes language. Project finance followed the wires. Offtake-backed loans got spines, ship X tons per quarter through Port A, maintain Y days of diesel, keep Z megawatts firmed by PPA or pricing steps up. Political risk insurance carved out exclusions that bit. If a blockade ties to water rights, no payout. If an earthquake blocks the pass, payout. Everyone learned to read those lines in plain terms. A CFO started every month with 3 dashboards: hydrology, power, port. Miss 2 greens, prepare for red ink. Micro stories carried the math. A port clerk in Megalones rearranged the yard so lithium drums lived under a roof near Gate 3. 1 storm, 0 damage, 1 schedule kept. A plant manager in Salta pushed for a second diesel farm, costly, yes, but when a regional blackout hit, his stacks kept humming. A shipper pre-booked reefers converted for temperature-stable chemical cargo so a cold snap wouldn't freeze valves. Boring, expensive moves that turned into invisible profits because nothing went wrong. Now derivatives. The market needed a way to price what the desert actually does. So traders built spreads: Atacama to Shanghai carbonate, basis Antofagasta berth availability, Hombre Muerto hydroxide, basis diesel at Paso de Jama, Uyuni carbonate, basis political headline risk with a rolling corridor that widened in election years. Sounds absurd until a landslide shuts the road and the basis blows out, exactly as priced. The paper didn't stop mud from sliding. It stopped balance sheets from sliding with it. But wait, there's more. Midstream processing hubs muscled into finance too. If you owned a polishing plant near port, you could offer tolling. Ship us crude carbonate, we'll finish it to your cathode's taste, then load it tonight. That killed 2 birds, upgraded quality and perfect timing. Tolling fees looked steep until you priced a month's delay. Automakers lined up because they valued calendar certainty over purity bragging rights. The hub became a clearinghouse for schedule risk. Insurance learned fast. Underwriters added riders that practically ran the plant. Proof of seismic bracing, lower premium. Live water and re-injection data posted publicly, lower again. Dual-lane road access with mutual aid packs for snow clearing. Knock another point. No union agreement at the port, sorry, surcharge. Policies excluded foreseeable risks, like blockades during hydrology disputes, unless you had signed councils with shutdown triggers everyone trusted. Suddenly, social license wasn't a nice-to-have, it shaved real money. Here's the crazy part. Spreadsheets began deciding who drinks and who mines. A desal line penciled in at a coastal node could feed 2 towns and a mine. If the NPV of avoided delays beat the capex, banks funded it. If not, the pipe stayed a drawing and the village kept hauling water in trucks. Cold math, warmed a bit by ESG committees that demanded community carve-outs, but still math. The Andes got a price, line by line. Impact: lithium stopped being just a brine story. It became a logistics asset class. Whoever mastered power, ports, and paper shaped supply more than whoever shouted louder on TV. And just when the models looked bulletproof, the ground reminded everyone it moves on its own time. Because there's one problem with toll roads in the sky: they crack when the mountain shrugs. The Andes fight back, nature's risk stack. But there's one problem: earthquakes don't read term sheets. Neither do landslides, whiteouts, or altitude sickness. The Andes carry a layered risk stack that turns neat schedules into maybe. You can buy power, you can pre-book ports, but when the mountain shifts, the only thing that moves on time is gravity. Action looks like this. A dawn convoy climbs a pass at 4,800 meters. The sky is clear, air thin, engines whining. Then a tremor, small, sharp, rattles loose rock. A ripple of dust becomes a curtain. The lead truck brakes, the third can't. A trailer kisses a guardrail that's mostly faith and rebar. Nobody dies, everyone waits. Road crews radio in, estimate 12 hours. Somewhere down valley, an operator watches the same ETA land like a brick on a Gantt chart. The polishing line can't stop mid-batch. They stretch a cycle, burn diesel to hold temperature, and pray a gasket doesn't give. Here's the crazy part. Seismic risk rarely smashes a plant, it nicks it. Pipe racks vibrate, bolts loosen, sensors drift. Maintenance windows creep forward. Each creep clips throughput. Insurance pays for the big one. It doesn't pay for chronic wobble. So operators install isolation pads, brace tanks, add redundant sensors, and run more frequent calibrations. It's money well spent until an investor asks why CapEx went up for nothing. The answer lives in a maintenance log nobody reads on earnings day. Meanwhile, weather stacks its own odds. El Niño loads storms on one side of a ridge, La Niña starves the other. Drought squeezes ponds and wells, then a burst storm dumps cold rain that slugs flow sheets calibrated for dry air. A crystallizer that behaved yesterday throws a tantrum today. The operator drops the rate to nurse quality through the swing. You do make up lost tons next week because the quota won't let you. Nature banks your deficit and charges interest. Roads at altitude add a chest layer. A sunny forecast at the Salars can hide black ice in a shadowed bend 2 valleys away. A driver crests a rise into ground-hugging cloud whiteout. Protocol says stop. Stopping at altitude means fuel burn to keep lines from freezing. Minutes turn to hours, hours turn to rescheduling a port slot you begged for. The toll booth model from earlier Titans, miss a window, pay in queue time and bruised credibility. Worker health is the quiet constraint that outsiders ignore. At 4,000 meters, even fit bodies slow. Headaches bloom, sleep thins, concentration slips. Training is harder, turnover is faster. A skilled operator might need 3 tours to build the altitude chops a lowland plant gets in 1. So companies pay for acclimatization camps, rotate shifts, keep oxygen on hand, and double up critical roles. Each fix trims risk and adds cost. The spreadsheet shows labor inefficiency. The line supervisor calls it keeping people alive. Tailings and brine spill scenarios look tame until wind gets involved. A minor overflow under blue sky dries as salt. The same overflow in a dust storm sends fine spray into places you didn't plan. Communities see that first, not second. So berms get higher, liners thicker, weather stations denser. Shut-off triggers tie to gusts and pressure drops, not just flow. You can hear a beam counter flinch. Then you remember the blockade photo from last year when someone skipped a berm. Unknown to them, across town, a reinsurance analyst reruns models. She widens the confidence band on convoy delays during shoulder seasons, hikes premiums for single-road exposure, lowers them for mutual aid packs that share graders and crews across concessions. This is where resilience earns a price. 2 access roads beat 1, a microgrid beats diesel alone, local EMT training beats extra helmets. The mountain rewards redundancy. Micro-stories keep the risk stack human. A mechanic tapes his fingers because wrenches bite colder at dawn. He jokes about it, then quietly checks a friend for altitude breath. A nurse at a camp clinic watches a pulse ox climb slow, calls for another day's rest, and takes a tongue lashing from a foreman who later brings her coffee. He knows she's right. A geotech walks a slope with a radio, taps a slab, hears a hollow note, and diverts a conv before lunch. No headline, no bonus. Just a day saved. Impact is blunt. Resilience premiums raise break-evens. Projects that look cheap on paper turn brittle at altitude. The winners spend on slack, extra inventory, cross-trained crews, whether windows baked into contracts, dynamic offtakes that let both sides throttle without blood. The losers chase throughput, then eat crow when the ridge ices. Communities notice who runs careful. They grant grace to the ones who slow when the wind says so. Here's where it gets interesting. This stack of nature risk doesn't kill the business. It refines it. It punishes arrogance and pays patience. It shifts value from first to steady, from fastest ramp to fewest stumbles. Operators who treat the Andes like a partner, not a backdrop, end up shipping more over 10 winters than cowboys do in 3 summers. And while risk teams colored maps and crews shoveled rock, markets far away made a move that would yank the floorboards under price. 3 days earlier, something strange occurred in Shanghai. The battery pivot and the great repricing. 3 days earlier, something strange occurred in Shanghai. A cathode line paused mid-run, then restarted with a different recipe. Not a lab test, a production shift. The message was quiet and loud at once. Chemistry could move faster than contracts, and when chemistry moves, price floors and ceilings redraw like tide lines. OEM panic doesn't look like headlines. It looks like engineers pulling all-nighters to requalify LFP for trims that were supposed to be nickel manganese. It looks like purchasing calling suppliers they ghosted last year and asking about anodes that play nicer with sodium ion. It looks like warranty lawyers rewriting clauses around cycle life because a new cell says it'll last, but only if the charger curve is different. The downstream world pivoted because upstream reality, slower tons, tighter quotas, water triggers, left no slack. Here's the crazy part. LFP's rise had been steady, then it tipped. No nickel, no cobalt, simpler bill of materials, and factories that could stamp out prismatic cells like bread. Range took a small hit. Cost fell enough to matter. Fleets and budget cars didn't care about 0 to 60. They cared about on-time deliveries and price tags that didn't move between pre-order and pickup. So automakers yanked on the lever they actually held, chemistry choice. They didn't need a minister's approval for that. They needed suppliers who could ship a lot of good enough cells on time. NMC didn't vanish. It retreated to where it shines, long-range, premium, cold-weather performance. But that retreat reshaped lithium demand's form. Hydroxide-heavy contracts suddenly mattered more for high-nickel cathodes. Carbonate-heavy contracts tilted toward LFP. Traders who thought lithium is lithium discovered the spread between carbonate and hydroxide could behave like two different planets. One spiked on a hydroxide shortage tied to a polishing plant hiccup. The other softened when a new LFP line in Ningde over-delivered. Same element, different bottlenecks. Plot twist, sodium ion walked in earlier than anyone upstream preferred. It didn't crush lithium, it flanked it. Short-range cars, city vans, two-wheelers, grid batteries that live and die on cost per cycle all leaned in. Energy density lagged, price and cold-weather tweaks improved fast. A pilot fleet of delivery vans proved a point. If your route is predictable, sodium's fine. That siphoned the bottom of lithium demand, the segment that cushioned miners when premium markets cooled. Suddenly, miners felt exposed to the part of demand that screams about purity and consistency and finds you for a trace of iron. Meanwhile, recycling stayed a promise on a slow clock. Everyone talked about closed loops. Scrap flows from gigafactories grew, but end-of-life packs were still a trickle. The late 2020s would change that. Today's contracts couldn't bank on it. So planners modeled a valley, volatile near-term demand, long-term growth intact, with a wobble in the middle where OEMs played chemistries like chess and storage developers trialed 3 battery types on the same substation. Action in procurement got brutal and smart. An automaker tore up a legacy offtake after 3 misses and signed 2 shorter ones with technical service clauses. Hit our spec 6 months straight and we extend, miss and the volume shifts to the other guy. A cathode plant split its feed blend, 60% from a premium hydroxide source, 40% toll-polished carbonate converted on site. That cost more per ton on paper. It cut the probability of a line stop in half. The CFO did the math and smiled. Impact on price was a great repricing, not a crash or a moonshot. Bands tightened where contracts ruled and widened where spot mattered. Carbonate and hydroxide decoupled at times, then snapped back when a port cleared a backlog. Futures with location basis started to matter more than headline indices. Traders who ignored hydrology updates lost money. Ones who watched El Niño maps and grid demand in Shandong quietly printed. Here's where it gets interesting. The pivot changed power inside companies. Battery teams, once secondary to design, got veto power. They could say, "We are switching half our trims to LFP next quarter," and the design studio had to catch up. Logistics had to find different separators, different binders, different recalls protocols. Service departments had to train on new failure modes. All of that because upstream tons
The Andes had
reached into conference rooms in Tokyo, Munich, and Austin, and moved chairs. Unknown to them, across town, a utility signed the deal that would finish the pivot's argument. A 2 gigawatt-hour LFP storage farm as a peaker killer. Not pilot, procurement order, penalty clauses, grid interconnect fast-tracked. The calculus was simple. Gas peakers burned cash in a world of spiky renewables. LFP banks could soak those spikes with contracts that rewarded availability, not chemistry elegance. Sodium ion nipped at that too, but banks wanted a 5-year proof first. Lithium won the right now, and the grid's checkbook dwarfed a mid-tier EV program. Micro stories carried the repricing home. A fleet buyer in Delhi switched scooters to sodium to shave costs and said range complaints dropped after a route planner app update. A German premium brand delayed a long-range trim because hydroxide purity wasn't stable. They put marketing dollars on a different model and prayed the forums didn't notice. A storage developer in Texas bid a battery farm into a capacity market with an uptime guarantee, then called a lithium supplier and said, "We'll pay more for boredom." In the aftermath, the line on every whiteboard changed, not lithium or bust, but lithium where it pays. The element didn't lose, it specialized. And that shift sent a new signal back up the mountains. The next buyer to knock might not be a car company at all. From their perspective, it wasn't about cars, it was about grids. Grids, storage, and the Andes as a power plant. From their perspective, it wasn't about cars, it was about grids. Utilities stared at solar curves that looked like roller coasters and wind ramps that showed up late to dinner. Gas peakers kept the lights on, but at a price that bled cash on quiet nights. So they went shopping for batteries that didn't care about tailpipes, only uptime. Lithium walked in with a simple pitch: we can move megawatts like water. Here's where it gets interesting. Grid storage changed what good looked like. A car cares about energy density and range on cold mornings. A battery farm cares about cycle life, calendar fade, safety, and cost per delivered kilowatt-hour over a decade. LFP checked those boxes. Big prismatic cells in shipping container racks, air-cooled, no cobalt drama, less picky on purity swings than premium nickel chemistries. The Andes didn't have to feed a sports car's appetite. They had to feed a substation's hunger for boring reliability. Action at a tender table looked like this. A utility put out a bid, 4 hours of storage, daily cycling, 10-year warranty, penalties for missed dispatch. Integrators paired LFP packs with inverters, wrapped them in software, and sold availability like a service. They called a supplier and said, "We need carbonate that polishes clean enough for LFP, steady for 18 months. Price mattered, but schedule and repeatability mattered more. A miner that could hit those rhythms found a new customer with deeper pockets and fewer marketing surprises. Impact rippled up the Cordillera. Lithium units that once flowed to automakers now split lanes. Some went to nickel-hungry hydroxide for long range. A growing share went to carbonate for grid LFP, where energy density didn't matter because land was cheap outside city limits. The quiet cartel logic tightened, quality bands, delivery windows, floors and ceilings. But now, dispatch contracts added another leash. If a shipment slip risked a grid penalty, buyers demanded priority. The desert's hydrology dashboard suddenly sat on a utility operator's desk. But wait, there's more. Flow batteries and iron air wandered in with swagger. Hours, even days, cheap and safe. On paper, they threatened lithium's long-duration flank. On the ground, they hit friction. New chemistries mean new codes, new fire rules, new training for crews who already speak lithium BMS like a second language. Banks asked, "How many megawatt hours have you actually run? In heat, in cold, through storms?" Pilots sprouted in parking lots and substations. Promising, yes. Bankable, not yet. Lithium kept the near term because it could sign contracts now and deliver by summer. Here's the crazy part. Latin America's own grid stepped into the story. Chile's long, skinny system with wind in the south, solar in the north, and a spine of transmission that groaned on hot days. Argentina's patchwork with provincial nodes that brown out when demand spikes. Bolivia's ambitions to stabilize remote towns and power small industries without trucking diesel forever. Governments looked at lithium leaving by the drum and asked, what stays? Domestic carve-outs appeared. A percentage of output, or better, a promise of local storage projects tied to community revenue floors. Not posturing, brownouts ruin elections. Action on a dusty lot outside Calama told the tale. A utility crew poured pads for a 50-megawatt, 4-hour LFP farm. Containers arrived with fans and inverters. A miner's rep watched because their carbonate would feed a cathode plant that fed these cells next year. The loop was visible. Sun hits panels in the Atacama. Lithium pulled from brine nearby charges a battery bank that sends power to a desert town at night. A line worker flipped a breaker. A row of lights hummed. Not green theater, grid insurance. Transmission versus mine expansion became a timing knife fight. A new 220 kilovolt line overpass took permits, towers, guys with ropes in thin air, and 3 wet seasons that might or might not cooperate. A mine expansion could pour pads and run gensets next quarter. CFOs did the brutal math. Spend capex where it moves revenue soonest. Smart ones cheated the choice. They funded microgrids, solar plus storage at site, shaving diesel and de-risking DLE's power hunger. The grid got a gift. Fewer brownouts from mines that no longer gulped public electrons on bad days. Unknown to them, across town, a regulator penciled a rule that would tilt everything. Storage could bid into capacity markets like a peaker if it proved 30 days of flawless dispatch. Lithium LFP could do that now, Iron Air might in 2 years. Money followed now. An integrator signed a 5-year service contract with daily test signals. Miss 2 pay a fine, Miss 5 lose a chunk of the award. They called their lithium supplier and said, "Zero drama or we eat penalties." The supplier called a hydrologist and said, "Tell me if the spring blinks." Microstories tied people to megawatts. A dispatcher in Santiago ran a battery string through a heat wave, smiling when gas turbines stayed cold. A teacher in San Pedro taught a class with lights that didn't flicker for the first August in memory, then voted for the mayor who backed the storage site. A maintenance tech in Catamarca swapped a fan belt on an inverter at dawn and texted a photo to her mom. "This pays for your medicine." Impact settled like dust after rain. Lithium graduated from EV metal to grid metal. The Andes weren't a mine, they were a pica plant spread across salt and sky. That reframed the fight. Hydrology councils weren't just about car dreams, they were about hospital lights. Quotas defended not just exports, they defended voltage at dinner. And the $20 trillion war started looking less like a scramble for rocks and more like a race to build steady power out of thin air and salt water. Now remember, the lie started with a promise. This is where it breaks. The $20 trillion number, what it really means. Now remember, the lie started with a promise. There's $20 trillion sitting in the Andes waiting. Get ready for this. The number isn't a pile of cash. It's a stack of maybes. It mixes rocks in the ground with prices on a screen, then forgets time, risk, and the desert's veto. If you want the truth, you have to unstack it. In-ground value is the loudest piece. Realized cash flow is the only piece that pays wages. Here's where it gets interesting. Start with the headline reserves that show up everywhere. Bolivia at 21 million tons, Argentina at 19 million tons, Chile at 9.8 million tons. Those are resources and reserves on paper. Bankable tons are smaller. Why? Because recovery lives at 30 to 50% in real plants, not the 80% you see on glossy decks. Because hydrology throttles pumps. Because cycle time and quality control eat ambition. Take those totals and cut them, once for recovery, again for speed, again for grade. What's left is the feed the market can actually swallow. Valuation math plays rough. A promoter multiplies in-ground tons by a spot price and calls it wealth. A CFO builds a discounted cash flow. They haircut recovery to the low end. They slow the ramp to match quotas. They price in reagent trains, port tolls, diesel, power, and a maintenance bill for altitude. They add political risk premiums shaped by years, like 2019 in Bolivia, when a government scrapped ACI systems, Uyuni deal, and paused TBEA-linked plans under protest pressure. Then they discount it all because money today beats maybe money in 5 years. 20 trillion becomes a fraction when cash meets calendar. Who gets paid along the way? Not who the headline suggests. States take royalties and taxes off the top, sliding scales that rise with price, sometimes with floors that keep schools open in slow quarters. Operators capture margin if they hit spec, avoid blockades, and keep cycle time tight. Midstream processors skim a premium for turning good carbonate into perfect hydroxide, month after month. OEMs claw value back with offtake leverage and technical service strings. Communities claim a share through revenue floors and jobs that last past the ribbon cutting. Traders and financiers graze every kink in the road, freight spreads, basis bets, insurance gaps. Stakes are brutal because tiny shifts shear billions. A 5% change in recovery, say 45 to 40, sounds small. On a 30-year mine plan, it's massive. It can erase a decade of dividends or pay for 2 microgrids, depending which way it goes. A 6-week slip in a ramp because a hydrology trigger flashed yellow doesn't make headlines. It moves a net present value by the kind of number that flips a buy to a sell in a fund meeting. A 1-point rise in political risk insurance because a province sharpened its water rules. That pulls a train of capex decisions behind it. Action in the model room feels almost petty. An analyst changes the reinjection energy load after a DLE fouling study, OPEX per ton bumps. A port uplift line $2, then $5, then $8 climbs after a storm season. A community stability budget grows because the company agreed to live dashboards and a clinic. None of those are drama. Together, they move the mountain on the spreadsheet. Meanwhile, the hydrologist in a trailer points at a spring that lags 2 months, and the plant manager says, "Throttle." That single word ripples into 10 cells in a DCF. Impact is the real reveal. The 20 trillion war isn't for ore. It's for cash flow that survives the Andes. Whoever strings patient, boring, resilient Quotas gets multiples that look like magic. The rest get discounted into the ground they came from. That's why Chile's strict predictability can price like a luxury brand. That's why Argentina's faster lanes fetch money when they pair speed with public meters and clear recourse. That's why Bolivia's sovereignty-first stance scares some capital, but attracts other capital that values control and a longer play. Plot twist, scenarios matter more than averages. Build 3 trees. 1. Drought deepens, El Niño and La Niña swing harder, quotas tighten, DLE works but costs more power. 2. Tech improves selectivity 10%, grids firm up with microgrids, water councils lock trust, ramp speeds up without breaking springs. 3. Politics jolts, contracts rewrite tone, offtakes pivot to grids, sodium ion bites low in demand. Each branch shifts rent capture between state, operator, midstream, OEM, and community. Each branch makes a different miner right. Unknown to them, across town, a pension fund quietly chose a lane. They passed on a glamour project with perfect IR slides and no port slot. They backed a dull operator with a battery-backed PPA, 2 access roads, live hydrology meters, and a community council that can hit a red button. Lower headline NPV, higher odds of actually paying coupons. That's the cash answer to the rock myth. Micro stories expose where the money really is. A payroll clerk in Salta hands out bonuses after quarter with no shutdowns. A grandmother buys a fridge that doesn't flicker and calls it her lithium dividend. A minister reads a dashboard at dawn, sees a spring stable, and signs a permit with a smaller quota and a longer term. An OEM buyer moves a tranche from a flashy newcomer to the processor who hasn't missed spec in 24 months. Billions shift on choices nobody films. So what does the 20 trillion number really mean? It's aspiration priced as certainty. The Andes tax arrogance. They reward patience, proof, and public trust. The war isn't won by whoever claims the biggest Salar. It's won by whoever can turn salt and time into steady watts and wheels, quarter after quarter, without breaking the spring that feeds the town next door. Lives on the line, micro stories from the salt. A farmer in Antofalla wakes before the wind. He taps a cracked well with his knuckle, listens, then lowers a tin cup. He tastes for metal, for dust, for yesterday. He keeps a notebook, date, cloud streaks, llama births, 3 lines on the margin when the water runs warm. Today it's cooler a hair. He closes the book, looks at his daughter, and wonders if this is the year they move down valley. Pride says stay. The jar on the shelf labeled truck water says don't be stubborn. A salt worker near Payne checks a windbreak and fingers a frayed tarp. He's got a pump song in his head. One wobble means a bearing's going. He learned it from his father who drove brine trucks before GPS. He texts a supervisor, slight pitch change, line 4. He doesn't use words like predictive maintenance. He trusts ears and a cheap decibel app. When the hydrology board posts yellow on a lagoon, he doesn't argue. He knows what a dry wind does in August. An engineer in Pastos Grandes babysits a DLE skid through a dust storm. She wipes a gauge with her sleeve, checks differential pressure, hears a rattle in a valve that wasn't there yesterday. The reagent tank sits 3 days from empty if the pass stays closed. She tightens residence time, loses throughput, and logs why. Her bonus hates that line. Her conscience sleeps fine. When the storm clears, she calls procurement and asks for 1 more month of buffer stock. CapEx, the buyer groans. She answers with a photo of mud on a filter. A protest leader in Susk stares at a group chat lighting up. A spring dipped. Kids will miss class if the blockade holds. He's not anti-mining, he is pro-water. At the municipal hall, he lays out demands: live meters on every well, a public dashboard, a shutdown trigger tied to a defined pressure band, not a promise. The company offers laptops for the school and a clinic roof redo. He doesn't smile. We'll take that, and we want the re-injection pressures on our phones. He can't sell his neighbor's words. He can sell a graph. A trucker climbs the switchbacks above Antofalla with a tote of caustic in the back and a saint on the dash. The weather ping turns yellow, wet snow maybe. He downshifts, thinks about the port slot in Medullones and the foreman who'll curse if he's late. He also thinks about the time a buddy slid and kissed a guardrail. He pulls into a turnout to chain up. 2 other trucks slide past. 10 minutes later, he hears on the radio one of them is blocking the lane at the blind curve. He unhooks and breathes. A port clerk in Medullones juggles a storm band and a ship SETA that refuses to stay still. She knows copper gets first dibs. She also knows the lithium drums in Shed 3 belong to a buyer with a clause that pays a penalty if the berth misses a window. She trades a favor, slides a tug assignment, and texts a yard boss. Gate 3 clear for 90 minutes. The ship clears. Nobody writes her name in a quarterly. The miner's CFO will never know. She saved a ceiling price clause from tripping. Hydrologist kneels by a piezometer in the Atacama and sees the needle sit 1 mark lower. He thinks about flamingos, not models. He also thinks about the plant manager whose face falls when he says slow. He writes yellow monitor 14 days. A week later, a lagoon reading creeps up. He texts hold and a convoy rolls. He keeps the message from his mother who asks if people hate him for saying no. He replies, sometimes. They still invite me to the festival. A payroll clerk in Salter counts envelopes on a Friday after a quarter with no shutdowns. A line item called stability bonus sits next to names she's known since school. She thinks about the board meeting where a director wanted to cut the community council budget. She thinks about the night the company kept the clinic's lights on with the site microgrid. She stamps the envelopes and slides 1 extra to the temp who covered 3 night shifts without complaint. A teacher in San Pedro turns on the lights during a windstorm and they stay on. She smiles, keeps the projector running, shows her class the public dashboard that tracks lagoon levels and re-injection flows. This is our homework, she says. If this goes red, we tell them to slow. A kid raises a hand. What happens if they do? She answers. Then we block the road. The class nods like that's math. A young geologist from Potosi stands with her grandmother by a spring that fed their family for decades. She opens an app and points at a curve that follows the pumps by 2 months. The old woman nods, squints at the water, and says, if the spring is fine, let them work. If not, we make soup at the road. The geologist laughs and cries at once. She spent 5 years learning phase diagrams. This is the only chart that matters today. Impact shows up quiet. Choices that look small move markets. A farmer's decision to leave means a blockade doesn't lift. An engineer's call to throttle keeps the lagoon from dipping into red, saving a quarter of trust. A trucker chaining up saves a berth, which saves a price band, which calms a fund manager's hand on a sell button. A clerk's shed shuffle keeps a cathode line running Saturday instead of dark. Thousands of these flips keep the $20 trillion dream from shattering on a dry stone. This was the moment everything changed. Governments blinked. Public meters, hydrology flaws, and shutdown triggers moved from protest signs into law. The new Andes bargain. This was the moment everything changed, governments blinked, and the rules went public. Trinational talks opened with a simple frame: shared aquifers, shared data, shared restraint. Not a cartel, call it a pact with the desert. Ministers arrived with lawyers. They left talking flow rates, cones of depression, and dashboard design. Because here's the thing, trust needs numbers everyone can see. Action started with meters. Every production well, every re-injection line, live online with agreed calibration checks. Community councils got logins and a red button. If pressure dropped past a band, pumps slowed without a fistfight at the gate. Revenue floors decoupled from tonnage and tied to hydrology, so schools stayed open when quotas tightened. Slower ramp, stronger floor. Processing hubs cracked another choke point. Open access polishing plants took crude carbonate from different operators and finished it to tight specs. Book a slot, post your brine chemistry, get tolling terms. The hub published monthly quality stats. which let cathode plants plan without guessing. Hidden concentration didn't vanish, but daylight made it less sharp. Meanwhile, permitting grew teeth and rails. Basin models were public, triggers were pre-baked. If El Niño flipped a switch, operators didn't plead. They pivoted to a maintenance cadence the contract already recognized. Lenders aligned cash with this rhythm, tranche unlocks for live data, community audits, and redundancy built-in second road, microgrid reagent buffer. Miss one, funding paused without lawsuits. China leaned in with corridors, roads, labs, training under the same dashboards. Western buyers leaned in with provenance and carbon caps, also under the same dashboards. Sovereignty stopped being a tug-of-war. It became the table the deals sat on. Impact, fewer shocks, tighter spreads, slower booms, longer runs. The desert got the last word, but now it spoke through meters, not marches. In the aftermath, the lie fell apart. Green isn't painless, it's negotiated daily. What breaks first, and what you should watch next. That bargain shifts power, the desert's numbers now steer money, and patience finally pays more than speed. If you want to see which mine threatens your favorite EV trim or keeps your lights on this summer, watch the map in our next video. Subscribe so you don't miss how a port slot in Antofagasta and a storm over the Malacca Strait can black out half the plan.